This is the second day of GeoIgnite 2020. The conference is going very well. Welcome again to the second day. We've got a fantastic second day keynote with Paul Kennedy from MDA, Vice President at MDA, who's going to be talking to us about Earth observation. And his keynote is entitled Growing Canada's Next Earth Observation Generation. So I'm going to let Paul take it from here.
Great, thanks, Jonathan. And I'll just share my screen here. If you let me share my screen, I'll get some slides up that we could talk to.
Hey, Tess, are you able to? Oh, there we go.
There we go. Thanks.
Sorry, I was still sharing mine, unfortunately.
That's okay. And somebody needs to enable me to be able to share.
Yeah, you should be good now.
There we go. Thanks. Okay, great. Thanks, thanks, Jonathan, and thanks for setting up such a great virtual conference. I was in a few of the sessions yesterday, and I thought it was really great. And there's certainly a couple more that I'm really looking forward to. Folks, as we begin, I guess I'd like to start by acknowledging that I'm speaking to you from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people. I think it's important to acknowledge their long history on and stewardship of the land around us. And surprisingly, I'm actually in the office today so that I could let my kids sleep. Normally I work from home, but today I came in. And obviously I prefer to do this live and in person because I think that's a more interesting way to run this process. But thanks for joining us online. Hopefully the virtual conversation will be interesting and ideally fuel a bit of an ongoing discussion of the future of Earth observation in Canada. So about me, I'm an EO nerd in my core, marine scientist and GIS specialist by training, but a remote sensing person at heart. I spent the last 22 years at MDA, working across a broad spectrum of EO activity with Canadian and international governments, with the resource industries, particularly energy and mining, and commercial EO satellite operators. I'm old enough to have met a number of the pioneers of Earth observation and real drivers of the last generation of Earth observation thinking. And luckily I'm young enough to know a number of the next generation who are going to take up that baton and really run with it. And I think we're on the brink of a really integrated and operational EO era that we've really been working towards for years, but have struggled as an industry to realize. I guess I want to start with, I'm going to start with a quote. Good old Winston Churchill has lots of great things to say. This one in particular, I think applies in Earth observation. It's wonderful what great strides can be made when there is a resolute purpose behind them. And one of the things I love about Earth observation and the geospatial industry in general is that there's a tremendous purpose in the work that we do. You know, when you heard Eric Loubier talking yesterday, when you heard David Harper talking yesterday, you can see and feel the energy and the passion and the importance of the geospatial industry as a whole, geospatial data processing, access to data, Earth observation, all these tools that we have are incredibly important. I've always been very proud of the heritage and reputation that in Earth observation that both MDA and Canada enjoy in the international market. Today, I wanted to talk a little bit about growing Canada's next EO generation. I recognize that the wording of that title is a bit awkward, but I purposely chose those words because I think for us to be successful and maintain Canada's position in the international EO market, we really need a new generation of leaders. And we need to be able to, and we need to be able to grow them, technology leaders, business leaders, government leaders, and have them carry the torch for the next half century of acceleration of EO. And for us as a small country, or a large country with a small budget, we really need to be able to accelerate that activity and think creatively about how we do these things. So today I've just got a few pictures to show, to highlight some historical successes, some places where Canada has really pulled more than our weight, and some ideas on where we might go, and some of the skill sets and mindsets we're going to need to get there. So, first I'd be remiss if I didn't say a little something about MDA. With a we have a 51-year history in the geospatial industry, both in civil and defense applications, systems for Earth observation, command and control, ISR, land title systems, aviation charting, a huge range of things. Meteorological systems, we've had a long history there as well, along with leadership roles, as you can see in the second and third rows here, in robotics and space operations and satellite systems, and with components and systems flying on hundreds of missions in both LEO and GEO orbits. We're very lucky. You can see on the right, the top picture, at the very right there is a picture of our founders, John McDonald and Vern Detweiler. And then we've been very lucky to be featured on both the $5 and $100 bill, and on a range of Canada Post stamps over the years. And that's really helps to illustrate the legacy of space and the importance of space in Canada. And it's what we need to build on. So when I think about Canada's history in EO, it's hard not to think of Landsat. As an early adopter and partner in the Landsat program, Canada installed ground receiving stations in Prince Albert, Saskatchewan, which I'm happy to say is still there, still being operated. It's a core piece of CCMEO's infrastructure, and we're proud to be a part of that. And the one pictured here from Shoe Cove, Newfoundland and Labrador. This is about 1978. And what's fascinating to me about those early years, and it started well before 1978. Canada was a partner in Landsat as far back as 1971, but it's the coast to coast nature of it, and I think that's really fascinating. As you can see, it's a pretty glamorous installation, and with very high production values and a massive antenna. I saw a recent photo of the site, and the only thing that remains is actually the concrete pedestal for that antenna is still there, so clearly well built. And when we go from one coast to the other, this is an image from CSAT on the left, and a picture of the IEEE Milestone Award that MDA received for processing for doing the first digital processing of a spaceborne SAR image from CSAT. It's a fascinating story. It was achieved by a Canadian team out of our Richmond office, or led out of our Richmond office. And on one of the many Air Canada flights that I tend to take, or at least that I did take until a couple of months ago, I found a short documentary about this project. It's called Under the Radar. It's by Erin Cumming, who's the daughter of Ian Cumming, who's a SAR legend in the world and a UBC pillar of academic achievement. And it's out there now on YouTube. I suggest that you watch it because it's quite a fascinating story, and it really shows you, especially if you imagine in 1978, not only was this done in Canada, but it was done in Vancouver. And Vancouver now, of course, is a great hip, happening place. And if any of you want to come work in Vancouver, I'm happy to talk to you about that, especially in EO. But in 1978, this was a long flight from anywhere. So, the fact that Canada together managed to accomplish this is really, really fascinating. Then as we move to our third coast, talk a little bit about some of the more recent achievements. When we look at the RadarSat series of family of satellites and the capabilities that that has created in the Canadian EO value chain and in the global EO world. It's really fantastic. This is an image of the Beaufort Sea ice activity in the Beaufort Sea, which was really the driving application behind the RadarSat program, and was a really important part of why SAR gained traction in Canada and why Canada became such a leader. And the Canadian Ice Service is a global leadership center in ice mapping and in ice analysis, and they've really done amazing things to drive the operational nature of the RadarSat missions. And the picture behind me, so that you don't have to stare at the wall of the office here, is of course the SpaceX Falcon 9 ready to launch RCM last year, just over a year ago, which was a really proud moment, I think, for everybody who was there. And one of the things that the RadarSat missions have done is they've really transformed the world's expectations of SAR missions. Very high image quality, flexibility, reliability, and service levels, and innovative models for supporting government and commercial users around the world. And I think some of those models are things we have to look to as we go to the future of EO in Canada. That RadarSat brand and its connection to Canada, because it is a brand of Canada, trademarked by the Canadian Space Agency, is strong. It's well known in EO circles everywhere. And behind that is this amazing web of government and academia and industry that provide a whole bunch of inputs, drivers, and supports for Canada's leadership in SAR. And what I find when I go, especially when I go talk to countries that are a little bit earlier on the EO adoption chain, even some of the Five Eyes, is that Canada's operational use of EO is inspirational to our allies and to our partners who share similar problems in security, environmental challenges, climate change response, those sorts of things. And I think this is a good place to talk about the whole value chain in EO. And as David Harper said yesterday, it's critical as we look forward that we think about the entire value chain. This isn't about building and launching satellites. This is about finding ways to use the geospatial information that those assets can provide to make smarter decisions and make better decisions. When I think of other parts of the value chain, I especially in Canada, I often think of PCI geomatics. I remember being a relatively young GIS student in the early 90s, using EasyPace and early versions of Geomatica to do image processing and really to sort of cut my teeth in this world. And those tools are so prevalent both in academia and in government and international governments, and were such an important part of some of that early data exploitation work with Landsat and RadarSat and ERS and some of these other missions. And one of the things I find today is the surest sign of a really vibrant Canadian EO value chain is seeing folks like Arnold and Kevin from PCI and folks from GHGSat and Northstar and EarthCast and Skywatch and all these folks at events in the far corners of the earth. We certainly punch well above our weight for a relatively small country and a country with relatively limited space and Earth observation budgets. As we look forward from these innovations and foundational achievements, we need to address the rapidly evolving technology landscape, the lessons learned about truly operational EO, and I think that is a place where Canada is really a leader, and the sustainability of the Canadian industrial base in EO. As both David Harper and Prashant said yesterday, we need to look across the entire value chain, and I think what I'm about to talk about and what will come up in the Q&A will be applicable across that value chain, though the challenges in market access and sustainability may differ at different points in that value chain. There are some highly specialized roles that that we staff and that we need to sustain in certain parts of the value chain that are certainly more difficult to have a long-term view on than others. So from there to where are we going? And I will admit, in hopes of supporting the conversation that David Harper started yesterday on the space-based Earth observation engagement paper that the government has put out. I took a graphic from that of the 6 critical future challenges right out of that paper. And I think these are all very important, right? When we think about sustainable agriculture, healthy Canadians, security, sovereignty, and defense, climate change response being a theme throughout, competitive resource sectors, and clean water. These are all places where space-based Earth observation can really weigh in and support. And they're clearly of huge importance to Canadians. Now, on the flip side, there's also, there's an ongoing set of conversations and mission concepts out there for potential space-based EO activities. EOSC, sort of the flagship program in CSA, the DESPI program with DND, SNOMAS, WildfireSat, WaterSat, and there are others. AIM North, I didn't put AIM North on here, which is a bit of a travesty because it's a super interesting mission and there's a lot of both national and international interest there. For me, I look at this and I say, okay, well, what do we need to do? How do we get from here to there? And I think, I'm so pleased to see David Harper and Eric Lubier and Eric Laliberté getting together and pulling together the whole of government view on space-based Earth observation. I think it's really important, and I think it's our job as the geospatial and Earth observation community to support that activity. And I feel like there are really 3 things. There's a strategy to be created, there's a prioritization process to happen, and then how the heck do we fund some of these things? And to me, I put a little asterisk on funding because I think we have to make sure that we're not completely focused on the Canadian government's budgets. We got to think about international partnerships. We have to think about industrial partnerships, creative solutions to meeting the operational need that space-based EO can. And what I'm going to talk about today is largely about the people, but I also want to talk a little bit about the process. So, and I alluded to this a little bit before, but how do we do this in a way that creates a sustainable employment and activity profile for everybody participating, industry, academia, government, make the best use of the resources we have, and really grow the capabilities and the high quality positions out there in Canada. So one potential formula for success, there are lots of them. I'm sure there are lots of different ideas out there. This is certainly one that has been successful in the past and I think works well. And the way I sort of put it is sort of, Canada and the government plus industry and academia equals success. And I think for us, it's a combination of success for Canada and success in the international marketplace for the Canadian industrial base. And I think both of those things are important. And I think we've seen both of those things. We've seen success in both arenas in the past, and I'm confident that we can do it again. So what do I think that Canada brings to the table in this? It's real operational and scientific challenges. What do we need to know? How do we need to know it? What's the service level that you need to get there? Engaged end users. Such an important part of the process. I mentioned the Canadian Ag Service before. We have an extremely engaged end user in the Department of National Defense and various elements there. I don't know if anybody's ever worked with Heather McNairn at Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. She is a very engaged end user and such a smart and passionate person about the value of Earth observation in agriculture. We need capital and or operational budgets. And the reason I put that there is because we got to look at different models and think about different ways that we can fund these activities. And then the last piece is on the procurement side. I think everybody knows government procurement is a tricky and challenging thing, but support for a variety of models and really starting to think creatively about how we could do this. What do I think industry and academia bring? There's a whole bunch of existing IP, and we have a great skilled labor base. Certainly in this building alone, we have over 600 people, about 470 of which are engineers, and they are, really top-notch human beings. Long-range internal R&D roadmaps, I think that's a really important piece as we start to look out at the vision for what could be. I've called them innovation cells and training programs. I think that the industry academia blend, we really lean on the academic side of the process to help drive innovation and help create well-trained, well-prepared human beings to come into this industry and really drive with us. And then market-driven investments. I think more and more we're seeing companies out there willing to make investments in space-based EO where there's a market problem to be solved. And I think that the big bonus is when we can overlap those market-driven problems with some of the operational and scientific challenges that Canada brings to the table. And when we pull those two things together and take them out to the international world, sort of somewhat random allocation of flags around the planet here, but thinking about places where, there are customers for Canadian industry, there's really interesting capability or data trades for Canada with allies and partners, and there's co-funding. So now I would say, with the exception of the US on this map, with the exception of the US, because they've always been sort of contributors and partners with Canada on co-funding programs, but for the most part, these other countries are just starting to ramp up their activity. And there's a really interesting opportunity for us there to go share the weight of doing some of these important things that we want to do. So how do we meet that challenge of strategy, priorities, funding? So we need a strategy, and the team's working on that, and I'm super excited. I encourage everybody to go read the engagement paper, answer the 6 questions that David and the team have posed, and really dig in and participate. We need industrial capacity. So how do we grow up the small companies, the larger companies? How do we do that? And I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. We need a talented, motivated workforce. And I'll talk about that in a couple of slides, because to me, that's what's critical to our success. And then we need creativity in how industry provides services and how the government of Canada consumes them and how we take them out to the outside world. And at the bottom here, to really, if we want to create a sustainable EO capability in Canada, we need a strategy to grow and support new leaders. So how do we keep bringing people through the system into leadership roles so that they can go out there and inspire and motivate that next generation of kids in high school, people in university, and folks who are looking for purpose in what they do. So now talking more specifically about that next generation leadership challenge, I think this really comes down to sort of 3 things that I think we need to be functional, and that's opportunities, training, and growth. And then there are 3 things outside of the honeycomb here that I think are what we need to thrive. So purpose, thought leadership, and diversity. And I'm going to come back and talk about those in a minute. But when I talk about opportunity, I'm thinking about having a steady portfolio and roadmap of programs and projects, creating this community of practice like we have today, right? We have, I can't actually see how many people are online, but yesterday it was about 170, 180, 200, something like that. But bringing together that community of practice through industry, academia, and government. And that shows people that there are interesting opportunities here and gives them a place to go, to be trained, to grow, to exercise those skills and feel that that gratification of a successful program. There's nothing like the night before a launch, and then there's really nothing like the night after a launch when you've had those first couple of contacts with the spacecraft and you know that things are okay. It's an amazing moment, and as people see that and feel that, they're pulled tighter into our network. Training's the other thing. So accessible, diverse, and complete undergrad and graduate programs are critical, right? Making sure that we have the talent base that we need. This is hard work, and we need people who understand all of the elements of what we're trying to do, especially as we try to shrink spacecraft and do more interesting things with payloads. The reality is there's like the laws of physics are still the laws of physics, and to creatively work with the laws of physics is something that's a fantastic thing to watch. I think in terms of co-op and internship opportunities, we need to be flexible and creative about how we do that and how we grow some of those young people. And then there's something that I've seen in other countries, particularly, I know David mentioned Australia yesterday. I've seen this extensively in Australia, and I think it's a really interesting idea. I don't know how to do it, so I'm looking forward to some smart people out there, putting their heads on this. But how do we arrange secondments and job trades between industry, government, and academia? And I know there are some activities in place, and this sometimes happens with the Space Agency and other places, but to have a culture of exchange and trust, I think is a really interesting view of how we grow the whole sector of activity. And then on the growth side, to me, this is about the diversity of opportunities and the diversity of companies and organizations and capabilities that we have. So a range of complexities of projects. So not everything needs to be an RCM, right? RCM is a big, complicated system, and it provided fantastic employment opportunities. The supply chain was massive. We had over 100 suppliers all across the country, large companies, small companies, all kinds of people. But not everything needs to be that way. A variety of companies, right? Startups, SMEs, larger companies. International work opportunities are a huge driver here. Learning how to, I've had some fascinating experiences, being in foreign government facilities, trying to install a system and get it to work. And you learn things that you could never learn just traveling to Ottawa or Prince Albert or Gatineau. And then part-time graduate studies and job sharing. So how do we see this future world, especially now that we're all used to working from home, to grow those capabilities of our people while they're productively adding to the industrial activity that we have. So I have one example of a place where here at MDA we're trying to connect, I would say, the opportunity and growth elements of that. And that's with our Launchpad program. Daniel Shilton's done a great job of reaching out to industry. Mike Greenlee, who's our CEO, has really instilled in all of us at MDA the importance of growing the pie, of being inclusive and creating partnerships, particularly with small and medium enterprise and academia. Launchpad was started about 18 months ago. We're up over 150 companies and academic groups who have kind of joined on and become a part of the program. Lots of them are still at fairly early stages, but we're really seeing places where we can take this beyond the traditional sort of vendor or supplier relationship into really partnering on some interesting programs here in Canada and internationally. And I think that the only reason I put the bit on the right about kind of what it is and how it works, the idea is it's a pipeline for smaller companies and people who are SMEs and interested in doing things and working maybe on bigger programs to connect with us. The Launchpad email address that's there is there so that you actually get a good engaged response, because Daniel and his team are great at responding, and my inbox is a bit of a disaster. So I just sort of raise that as one place where we're really trying to reach out, and it's not perfect, but it's a starting point. And I think that we'll see more of this as we go along. And I think it speaks to that community of practice notion that we have. And then I really just have one more thing, and then I'll turn it over for questions. But I talked a little bit about the need for purpose, thought leadership, and diversity for us to really thrive. And I think we have purpose nailed. When I watch people like Eric and David and Prashant and others, and Heather, when she speak about Earth observation and the importance of geospatial data in our everyday lives, I am hugely compelled by this, and I'm fascinated by what we're able to do. So I think we have the purpose box checked 100%. And I think people see that when they work with us, and when we talk about what we do. That was actually possibly the most fascinating thing about the RCM launch event. Was we had about 150 people there, and every single person was committed to the purpose around that mission. And anyway, it's a fascinating thing. Thought leadership, I think we're in a great place here. I think there are both academic and industry and government leaders who are really out there thinking about what's next, and thinking about how we cement Canada's place in the future of EO. And I put a red circle around diversity because, in my view, diversity takes many forms, and our teams should reflect our communities. And I don't think we're there yet. And I don't have the answer, but it's something we need to talk about. I'm extremely pleased that there's a diversity panel coming up in a couple of hours. And I plan on being there to hear what the team has to say. But I think this is critical. And I think that we need to find ways through sponsorship and other tools to really change the landscape of our leadership in the Earth observation business. It's a problem across the STEM disciplines, and we're not different in that respect. I don't think the problem's any better or worse in Earth observation, but I do think it's a real challenge. Now, I did put 2 Twitter handles on here because Heather let me know about Sisters of SAR, which I think is fantastic. Not only because SAR is sort of the sometimes feels like the unloved cousin of Earth observation, but also because it really is. There's great information that comes out on that Twitter feed, and it's creating another community of practice. And then there's Ladies of Landsat, which is sort of an optically oriented. Similar idea. So the seeds are planted, and we have some great leaders out there, but we really have a bunch of work to do here. And I look to people who are far more knowledgeable about diversity and inclusion to help us through it. I guess I wanted to make the point today that I think for us, we need to see this challenge and meet it and figure out how to get there. So that's pretty much it. I think, we have a tremendous history as an EO leader. We punch well above our weight internationally. We've done some amazing things, and we continue to do amazing things, right? RCM is being operated right now. We have other missions in the work. There's lots of great stuff going on. And David talked yesterday about the meteorological data processing that happens every single day to make our weather forecasts work. There's a ton of amazing work going on. And the challenges that we have today in climate change response, safety and security, agriculture, everything, are really well suited for EO. But they need operational EO, and they need a combined effort to get there. And that collaboration, I think, is critical to building on that foundation we have. And what we really need is a sustainable program or portfolio of programs and a vibrant export market to help grow those next gen leaders. And and we need to give them opportunities. We need to give them training. We need to give them a growth path, and all that needs to be founded in a diverse team. So with that, I'll kick out and leave it to the question crew.
Hi, Paul. Thanks for that fantastic presentation. So many interesting things there. I forgot to mention at the start how much we're pleased to have MDA as a gold sponsor supporting the event. Without that support, we wouldn't be able to do things like the diversity program within diversity leadership program within GeoIgnite that we started last year. I'm going to, we don't have a ton of time left for Q&A, but everybody please go ahead and put your questions. We'll get through what we can in the Q&A tool, but I think I'd like to kick things off. Paul, you were talking about a lot of things near and dear to my heart, which is jobs and employment in the Canadian geospatial sector. I was wondering, I do career seminars fairly regularly for Canadians, for both students and new grads and professionals. And I'd like to give you a couple of the questions I get quite a bit. Specifically to MDA, can you identify some good career paths? Are there certain programs that MDA hires out of or has relationships like co-ops already in place with that people could try to get into to follow to work with MDA?
Sure. I mean, it's interesting. We have such a diverse workforce, and so there are a wide range of programs that we take folks from. I guess I'll speak maybe more directly to the geointelligence side and the geospatial side of our world. We take a ton of people out of just computer engineering, software engineering, electrical engineering. We also have a number of engineering, physics, optics, signal processing type folks, and they tend to come from quite an interesting range of backgrounds. We have mathematicians. I'm a marine biologist by training, and I still managed to get in the door. So, what I find for us is it's particularly on the software side of things, it's being able to be adaptable, be able to have, the core math physics understanding and to be able to do that. We have a very strong relationship, and we sponsor a SAR industrial chair at SFU out here in Burnaby. We've had a long relationship with UBC, of course, but we have relationships across the country and have had a lot of success with engineering graduates out of Queens and Waterloo and other places. So it's really, I think it's about folks who are interested in the kind of business we have and interested and have that core set of skills that we can then go and grow on.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So we've started to get some questions from the audience. I'm going to start with the first one, which I think is excellent. It's from Michael Matthews. How do we create interest at the high school level for students to consider careers in the geospatial industry?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think it used to be really challenging, and it's getting a bit easier. Partly because what we're finding is we get a ton of reach out from high school groups doing robotics, particularly doing robotics focused programs. And I think because of the proliferation of low-cost robotics and the acceleration of high school robotics activity, we're getting a lot of reach out. And I think that's a great avenue for kids to get into this kind of activity and thinking about space and thinking about the engineering and physics problems that come with it. We do things like we have a program for the Take Your Kids to Work Day. Here, we also get reach out from our local high schools just to come in and see the facility and see what we're doing, and we'll actively pull those in and make things happen. But I think some of these robotics programs and some of the online learning activities are really, really helping to pull that together.
Great. I used to, with Go Geomatics, when I first started Go Geomatics, did something that The remote sensing prophet Cogs, his name was Manu, used to organize a group to go to the Cantley receiving station. I'm from Wakefield. And
Okay.
so every year at the start of the school year, I started taking GoGeomatics groups from Ottawa. That would be a wonderful, I don't know if you guys have a more formal program. I used to just call Leslie and organize that. I've stopped doing it because we got busy doing other things, but it was an excellent way to show people a really interesting facility and kind of get their hands around another component of remote sensing in the base station component. It's not just about the satellite, it's about, you know, that component as well. It would be exciting to see, if we could do more things like that. What do you think?
I think that's a fantastic idea. And, you know, Leslie and Etienne and the team and Renee and the team there are so great and so good at communicating the end user perspective, right? Because they're on the coalface of this thing and dealing with folks who really need this information and need to integrate it. And so they have great examples of where it's been useful in the world. I think it's a great idea, and I will certainly reach out. I'm not sure exactly what if there's a formal way of doing that today, but I'm
Sure.
happy to follow up. Yeah.
We've got a question from Prashant. I think it's going to have to be our last question because we're coming up to not a hard stop. We'll go to 10 minutes to the hour. So the question from Prashant is, Paul, I have grown very concerned about the nature of federal investments in Earth observation and geospatial. I wonder if you were able to speak candidly about the attempt at consolidating EO programs within the Canadian Space Agency and undoing the very vital EO supply chains in a variety of different departments at a time when we discuss ecosystems and an approach that is an ecosystem of ecosystems. What is MDA's view, and how will you support the growth of a more strategic set of supply chains and not a simplistic one?
Well, this question proves why Prashant is one of my favorite people, because he's willing to ask that thought-provoking question. So I guess what I would say is I'm really enthusiastic about this space-based EO engagement process that the team in Ottawa and Saint-Hubert and elsewhere have put together. To me, I think we need to use that process to get the folks who care about EO and who have operational and scientific goals that can be achieved through EO to come together and figure that out. You know, as an industrial player, it's not really my place to sort of tell people what to do, but I think that we can be a part of that solution. We've seen how other international governments have decided to structure things. We have experience with a number of the agencies involved in Canada, and I am certainly personally super keen to lean in and have the hard conversations about how we could potentially do things. And that's part of why, you know, in this process, I talk about all of us kind of stepping back a little bit and saying, okay, so there are ways that we've done things and there are ways that we've historically worked. How do we best position ourselves given the budgets, the schedule, the constraints that we have? How do we go and create something that brings value to Canada and builds this vibrant industrial base that we can take to the rest of the world and really go out there and give it?
Excellent. Thank you very much. So we've come to the end of the second day keynote, Paul. Thank you so much. We're going to go into a short break and we're going to be coming back with Quantum Spatial Canada, and they're going to focus of their talk. The title is What's New? Innovations and LiDAR Applications for Trees and Water. So that should be excellent. Quantum is also our silver sponsor. Paul, again, thank you on behalf of the GeoIgnite team. And as well, I'd like to thank Edward, who was instrumental in putting this together. It was just fantastic working with you guys again.
Absolutely. Thanks very much, Jonathan. Thanks, Tessa. And have a great day.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
See everybody after the break.